Hi, Robin.
Hi, Sabrina. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm okay. Glad for the long weekend coming.
Yeah, definitely.
You might be the only one tonight.
Yay, it's over. She can't make a decision by herself. That's dictatorship.
That's right. Oh, God. We really need Ken for budget stuff, so that's the key. A quorum and Ken. Out of luck, Robin.
You got your
got a quorum.
Here they come.
no Ken, but you got your quorum.
You were thinking we weren't showing up tonight, Robin?
You can always hope.
Wouldn't miss it for the world.
Oh yeah, there are some things worth missing this meeting for. I'm sorry.
That was tongue in cheek. Come on.
I understand. I understand.
Neil, I see a hand up. Is that a person who's supposed to be presenting or something?
Yes.
Okay. So I think I see Steven, and we'll do our usual spiel, and then I don't know if you need to bring them over to clarify anything.
Sure.
Hi, Steven.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Dominic.
Good evening. Thank you for having us tonight.
Hi.
They'll go through a few housekeeping things, and then we'll begin your section.
Excellent. Well, thank you to everybody, and I just wanted to say, Neil, we did put together a presentation, so I don't know if I need any particular permissions to be able to share screen or anything like that.
You should. As long as you're a panelist, you should be all set.
Thank you. And I also have my colleagues, Mike Kaplan and I believe Ben Chamberlain joining on the call as well.
Okay.
They may be helpful for Q&A or during the presentation. You don't have to put them on now, but just as a heads up.
I will.
All right. So I see we have everybody, I think. I think I saw Ken.
Yep. Ken.
Great. All right. So hi, everybody. Hi, Ken. Hi, Jeff. Hi, Anna. I didn't actually say hi. So I will read our right to know checklist, and then we will dive in. All right. As chair of the Hopkinton Select Board, due to the COVID-19/coronavirus crisis, in accordance with Governor Sununu's Emergency Order Number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this board is authorized to meet electronically. Please note there's no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to the meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, this is to confirm we're doing the following. A, providing public access to the meeting by phone with additional access by video. We're using Zoom tonight. All members of the board have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during the meeting through Zoom. If the public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate in the meeting by dialing 1-646-558-8656. Meeting ID is 340-316-049. We also provided a Zoom address. B, providing public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting. We previously gave notice to the public of how to access the meeting using Zoom, and instructions are provided on the Town of Hopkinton's website at www.hopkinton-newhampshire.gov and on the Town of Hopkinton's Facebook page. C, providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anyone has a problem, please call 603-746-8242 or email townadmin@hopkinton-newhampshire.gov. D, adjourning the meeting if the public is unable to access the meeting. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting, we'll adjourn and have it rescheduled. A few things to keep in mind. This meeting's being recorded. It will be available to watch at a later time. The link will be on the town website. The board is unmuted. Everyone else is muted. If you have a question during the meeting, you can raise your hand. And all votes tonight will be taken by roll call vote. So we will start the meeting with roll call attendance. Please state your name and presence and whether there's anyone in the room with you as required under the right to know law. This is Sabrina Dunlap. I am alone in my office. Anna.
Anna Wells, I'm alone.
Stephen.
Stephen Whitley, alone.
Jeff.
Jeff Donahoe, alone.
And Ken.
Ken Trauman, I'm alone.
All right. I think I'm going to have that memorized soon. Doesn't make it any less painful. Okay, so first up, we have our approval of the consent agenda.
I'll move we approve the consent agenda of November 23rd, 2020.
Second.
With someone signing this week. Ken, are you?
Sure. I'll work out the time with Neil.
Okay. Thank you.
I can sign, it's fine.
If you could get there in the morning, Jeff, because I have a dentist appointment.
Yep, no problem.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, Sabrina's yes. Anna,
Yes.
Ken,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes,
and Stephen.
Yes.
Thank you. And now we have approval of the public meeting minutes from November 16th, 2020. I had one very minor edit. I think it says that we adjourned at 8.
I caught that already.
Okay, I was
Yes.
gonna say. if
That was
we're
a
gonna stay past
leftover.
11, we gotta get quick.
11:06.
it was just before dawn.
Thank you.
Oh, God. Okay, thanks, Robin. That was my only edit. I don't know if anyone else had anything. Okay. Motion to approve.
Okay, I'll move we approve the amended minutes of November 16, 2020.
All right, I'll second that. Sabrina's yes. Anna,
Yes.
Stephen,
Yes.
Ken,
Yes.
and Jeff.
Yes,
Thank you.
Okay.
Our-
Sabrina, before we get into the next item, I wanted to mention a point of pride. And that is that last week, the Hopkinton Rotary presented to Chief Yale for the fire department a ventilator that can be used as a life-saving measure, and it can be used on both ambulances. It was a $15,000 item that was provided through a combination of donations from the Hopkinton Rotary Club, matched and enhanced by the district as well as the global organization. And we just wanted to thank Rotary for presenting that.
Yeah, thanks for flagging that, Ken. I saw that, I think, on our town Facebook page. That's really wonderful. So thank you to Rotary and everyone who made that possible. Okay, so our 5:30 appointment is Deer Meadow Solar regarding update on project.
Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Dominic LaBelle. I'm joined by a couple of my colleagues tonight, Mike Kaplan, Andrew Preventure, and Ben Chamberlain as well. Thank you very much for your time tonight. We've put together a presentation with some updates regarding the project. As some folks listening in are probably aware, this project's been something that Olivewood's been working on since back in 2018. And has been working with the towns of Hopkinton and Webster on for some time. Back in 2018, we originally discussed a lease of some town-owned property associated with the transfer station, and the project has evolved over time since then. So we're here with some updates on where the project currently stands and what we view as the path forward. And please let me know when you are able to see my screen.
Yes.
We're good.
Excellent. So as a brief aside, I just wanted to sort of start out by pointing out that the project has been known over time, again, since its inception was sort of as a project entirely located on the transfer station associated land. At that time, the project was known as Hopkinton Solar. Given some of the evolution of the project over time and its current location, we are going to be doing business as Deer Meadow Solar. Moving forward, Hopkinton Solar will remain the legal entity, as it's the entity we have a number of agreements under. But moving forward, you may hear us referring to the project as Deer Meadow Solar, and I just kind of wanted to give everyone the heads up on that. So regarding the expansion of the project, we want to start by addressing sort of some of the changes from previously talked about iterations. We've been working closely with the two towns since spring of 2018. The updated project size is 75 megawatts. It is still the same 7 megawatts anticipated on the Hopkinton side of the border, as has been the case for some time now. The project originally began as a 17 megawatt project, as discussed. After signing a letter of intent for that land, it became clear in discussion with the boards that it was preferred that the project be off of and away from the transfer station and landfill cap. We agreed to it then, and I wanted to make sure to note that we're still doing so. I had heard that there was a NHPR radio story last week referencing this as a landfill cap project. So I just wanted to kind of wave my arms and be totally clear on that. We are not planning to construct on the landfill cap. So after agreeing to stay away from that cap landfill, we sought to incorporate some private land and identified a landowner on the Webster side of the border who we began to work with. In 2019, lease negotiations were approved at town meeting. We publicly discussed the then 35 megawatt iteration of the project and executed the lease and pilot agreements with both Hopkinton and Webster. In the early part of 2020, we got some interconnection information back indicating significantly less capacity on the line than we'd previously anticipated. I reached out to Neil at that time to let him know we would be spending some of the upcoming months looking for an alternative interconnection location. And so we identified the line indicated here on the map just to sort of point folks out and orient them on what it is that you're looking at here on the map. This is the original point of interconnection. This is the transfer station land here. And this is originally to the south. The updated point of interconnect will be on the Webster side of the border to a 230 kV line that runs overhead. It's a much larger line than the previously anticipated. Given that much larger scale, the cost to interconnect was going to be significantly higher than previously expected. So we sought to spread those additional costs over more megawattage by incorporating some expansion acreage. We have identified in that map the original project parcels versus some of the incremental parcels that were added. Our focus was to identify flat, dry, well-screened land in the area and spend much of 2020 completing environmental studies and other diligence to try to gather in as much information as possible, as well as beginning to the state agency consultation process and engaging with other stakeholders as well. As I noted earlier, we are changing the doing business as name of the project to Deer Meadow Solar. So to give just sort of an update on the approach moving forward, we're going to continue to work collaboratively with the two towns. Our intent is to do some significant information and input gathering with local boards and stakeholders. We're happy to do that in the way that the town of Hopkinton feels makes sense for it, whether that be individual boards if the town would like, or some sort of joint board committee. Over in Webster, just as a general heads up, they have chosen to do the sort of joint committee approach. Excuse me. We will be doing some additional outreach to neighbors in the coming months. In summer of 2019, we knocked on the doors of the then 35 megawatt project's neighbors to give them some information and contact info for us. We'll be doing something similar in the future, though the form of what that looks like may vary a little bit, just given some of the current circumstances and restrictions on in-person activities. We're also seeking an amendment to the pilot agreement in place to update some items like the reference to total project size and updating our notice address. We'll be working closely with the two towns and local boards regarding a memorandum of understanding with each town. You also hear us refer to MOU throughout the meeting tonight. The MOU is the vehicle for many of the items you typically associate with a local permitting process. Things like signage allowed, construction traffic, setbacks used. We can go into some more of those items in a bit. But the MOU creates binding obligations that the project would have to comply with during development and operation. And we'll be ultimately submitting an application to the New Hampshire SEC. This is the approach that we agreed to with the towns during the lease negotiations. And at the current project size, state law compels us to permit at the SEC. Throughout this process, there'll be a lot of opportunities to meet with us publicly, have questions answered, and have local input heard. We will be back many times, and we'll get some more into the SEC process in a moment, but I think it's also worth pointing out that the Hopkinton Select Board is fortunate to have Steve Whitley, who's actually participated in the SEC process in the past. Steve, please feel free at any point to jump in and correct us if we're not saying anything quite right on how the SEC works moving forward. But he, I'm sure, will be a great resource to the town on all things SEC. So to orient folks on what the project sort of looks like, we showed that earlier image with the incremental and original project parcels. I think it makes sense to do a little bit more of a zoomed in layout. Assuming that folks can still see my mouse icon, is that the case? Excellent, excellent. I always got to double check with these things. So the Hopkinton Webster town line is a straight line shooting from the southwest sort of northeast direction here. This is the Webster Boscawen border, and somewhere in here is the Hopkinton Concord line. So down in the corner here is Hopkinton, Boscawen, Webster, and Hopkinton. The originally envisioned project size was on the transfer station land, as we'd mentioned. The blue, the darker blue dashed line areas are the originally proposed project parcels and expected preliminary panel areas. We thought, just as a helpful way, we'd differentiate between the incremental panel area expected with the lighter blue versus the original in the darker blue. The line, as mentioned earlier, is a 230 kV line running along the east side of Webster. The sort of hash marked area here is the intended project substation, and the diagonally striped yellow areas are construction laydown area for things like temporary staging of equipment and vehicle storage overnight during the construction period, that sort of thing. I will come back to the layout after we've gone through some more slides. I think it makes sense to probably have this up as folks ask some questions afterwards. So I will be coming back to this in just a moment. But we also wanted to get into some of the principal design criteria of a project and how it is that we approach this type of project. So starting with safety, we coordinate during the MOU process with the two towns regarding items like fencing, and emergency responder access and training. We're actually working with an individual from TRC that is a firefighter instructor. He'll be helping us out with items along those lines. Regarding environmental considerations, we've completed a vernal pool survey and the field work for wetland delineations, and we've also engaged some additional stakeholders, namely a couple of conservation organizations. We've also begun the state agency consultation process with Natural Heritage Bureau, Fish and Game, and the New Hampshire Division of Historical Resources, attempting to learn as much as we can about local species of importance, expected habitats in the area, any sort of cultural or historic resources that may be present at the site or around it. For post-construction considerations, the seed mix will include native and beneficial species consistent with solar farm usage. Maintenance is expected to be minimal. One of the ways that we do that is that seed mix also has a focus on slow and low growth vegetation, so that we're able to minimize the extent to which it's necessary to go in and do any sort of mowing. There's little to no additional sound expected from the project. Equipment is going to be set back away from property boundaries. Regarding decommissioning, we'll be submitting a plan as part of the SEC application with the project to pay decommissioning costs. Visually, the project's able to be screened principally by existing trees and vegetation. There's no lighting required at night, so there should be no effects from that. We also wanted to go through a bit of an overview of the SEC permitting process sort of more broadly, specifying sort of the principal activities, those activities undertaken by us and the SEC themselves. And on the right-hand column here, you'll sort of see the different ways that the town is able to participate in the process. As a starting point, from our perspective, we're looking to use the MOU as a basis of obligations that the project will make to the towns. And our desire is to work through the MOU process together in a way that the towns can feel good about participating in the SEC process. And we view that as the primary vehicle for input, but there's also opportunity for the town to be what the SEC calls an intervener and participate in the process that way. As I mentioned, that was Steve's role in a previous SEC service date. So we'd ideally like to submit our application in 2021, be approved and start construction in 2022. Again, trying to facilitate that 2023 in-service date. So our primary focus is engaging with the community and stakeholders, information gathering and completing the studies necessary to facilitate project design and the permitting process. I am going to show my contact information for a moment for folks. In case anyone wants to reach out, this is my email and phone number. Please feel free to give us a call at any time. And I'm going to leave this up for just a moment so that folks are able to jot that down if they'd like. And then I will head back over to the layout. But thank you very much for the time for the presentation. And we're happy to take some questions from the board.
Dom, this is Ken. Thank you again for the presentation. I guess just for the benefit of the rest of the board and anybody who's listening on, it's my understanding that the only property within the borders of Hopkinton that you'll be addressing is the transfer station property.
That is correct, yes.
And as far as the lease agreement and the dollars that were approved at town meeting and the pilot, there's no change as far as Hopkinton is concerned.
There is not. From the executed lease and pilot agreements, there will be no change in the commercial terms or dollars, though it is worth noting that with the change in the interconnection point, we'll actually be utilizing even less acreage on the Hopkinton side than previously anticipated.
Right. Thank you for that. I believe we had a question, probably Stephen's better asking it than I am, but it was from our attorney about the revision that you would like us to agree to, that I believe you're dropping a reference to RSA 374 F3 V little f3.
Mm-hmm.
And if you could explain why.
It was an incorrect reference. I believe what you're referring to in the agreement, we'd had a reference to a definition and it was incorrect. So we caught that, and we thought as we're going through the process of updating some other items in that pilot agreement that it made sense to correct the reference as well.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, I guess because I've sat through the presentation before, I don't have anything else to ask. I don't know, Stephen, if you did.
No, and just as Ken mentioned, just for the board and the public's benefit, Ken and I have seen this presentation and already, and so I don't have anything to add at this time, but just wanted to thank Dom and the rest of the crew from Olivewood for coming here to meet with the board. So thanks. Good to see you guys again.
Thanks
Yes.
for having us. Good to see you as well.
I don't have any questions. Thank you. This was great. Anna or Jeff, do you have anything?
I don't. It was a very thorough presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm all set, thanks.
Great. Okay.
Mike, from the Olivewood side, is there anything that you would like to add on our end?
No, again, we appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight, and I've really enjoyed working with everyone and look forward to continuing to work with you and the MOU process as well as the project overall. So thank you again.
Excellent.
All right.
Well, I'll flash my contact information one more time before stopping the screen share here.
All right. I did not see that come up, but I think if people need to find you, they can find us and we can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. And for anyone who is listening at home, Neil, I hate to flood you with calls, but if anybody does have questions, Neil has my contact info.
All right, great.
Neil
Well,
is
thank
very
you.
used to that.
Phone's ringing already.
Well, thanks for coming in tonight.
Thank you very much for your time. We're really looking forward to working with the board here throughout the process moving forward.
Same. All right. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
You
Thank
too.
you all.
All right. Ken and Stephen, thank you for your work on that.
Oh, most welcome. Brings back memories of when I was working at Public Utilities.
Nice. All right. So I think that brings us into budget discussion and work. And Ken kindly offered to lead us here since he is our budget guru.
I don't, I'm not sure if that's the right word. I
Budget
don't know,
master.
Sabrina, I don't know if there are participants listening in because we have the mask ordinance further down the agenda. And I was thinking because of the governor's action, we'd probably table discussion on the mask ordinance. So would it make sense to just take that up first if it's going to be real quick? So those listening might not have
Sure.
this-
Yeah, that's fine. I thought the same thing initially, but I'd be curious to hear others' thoughts because I actually, I think after reading the state's ordinance and the fact that it is currently, it has an end date of January 15th, I believe. And it doesn't really, there's another emergency order that has language around enforcement of other EOs, but what I've heard about the mask one is that there's really not much around enforcement. There's no penalties for non-compliance. So I was thinking since we've come this far, and I really think we're close on agreeing on language, that I think it makes sense to move forward with ours anyway, because I just worry that there's potential that the state, is better overall come January, that EO is rescinded. And then, if things still don't look great in Merrimack County or whatever, for whatever reason, it just feels like we've come this far. I also think that there is something to the fact that if we have our own ordinance, we can do more on education and hopefully providing stores with masks, which I think we could probably do anyway too, but and also providing stores with signs that they can put up that say, mask required under town ordinance. So that's my take. I'd be curious to hear where others land.
I missed the first part of that because I stepped out to get my budget book.
So Ken was saying he thought that we might table the mask ordinance, and I was just making an argument for the fact that I think that it makes sense to just continue with the public hearing next Monday and move forward with our plans for an ordinance for a variety of reasons. But so I was curious to hear where others land on that.
Yeah, I heard the reasons, but I didn't
Okay.
understand what brought it up. So thank you for filling me in. No, I agree that I think we should go ahead and schedule and have the public hearing and hear from members of the public or anybody else that is interested. And I agree, Brini, with the kind of reasons you ticked off about why it might be a good idea to go ahead and have our own local mask ordinance, even though there is one at the state level.
I disagree. I'm sure it's not a surprise to anybody on the call. You wanted a mask requirement, we have one. I just think that we're wasting time.
Yeah, as I said before, I thought it made sense to table it. I agree with Jeff that what I thought the main thing we wanted to do is use it for educational purposes. And I think that, the mask ordinance the governor passed does do that for educational purposes.
Anna?
I would tend to agree with you, Sabrina and Stephen, that continuing forward now that we've come this far and are very close to some really good language. I think having a public hearing is an opportunity for community discussion around it, which can provide us with feedback as well as education for the community. I think that state mandate is a very positive step, and I'm very appreciative for that. But I do also think that given the lack of enforcement repercussions, possibly adding a layer in by way of a town mandate could also go a long way.
You all
So-
said last week that it wasn't about enforcement. It wasn't about finding people. It was about education.
Yeah.
You
Well,
seem to be reversing course on that you just want to be able to find people.
No.
If that's what you want to do,
Jeff-
then you just need to tell
Whoa,
people.
Jeff, that's not a fair assessment.
It's a very fair assessment. You wanted a mask requirement, you have one. Why are we
Um,
wasting more time on it?
I don't think it's fair to say we just want to find people at all. I'd be happy to take
That's
the
the
fines
only
out of
thing
ours.
the ordinance is going to accomplish. That's what Anna just said. We're going to have the ability to find people.
I would move forward with ours without a fine because I think it makes sense to have one at the local level in case the state one is rescinded before we think it's appropriate.
That's fine with me as well.
So could we push a public hearing into January?
I guess I think it doesn't make sense. We've come this far. We're close to having good language, setting aside the enforcement piece. And I think if we get to January and we do decide we want to move forward with an ordinance again, and the state's rescinded theirs, we're behind the 8 ball again. That's where I'm coming from, Jeff and Ken.
But to
So-
say we've come this far isn't a valid argument to me. The governor accomplished what you wanted to accomplish with your ordinance.
But
And
do
so
you?
now the analogy is throwing good money after bad. We're throwing good time after bad. And
Okay.
we went till 11 o'clock the other night. If we debate this with the public after the budget thing, we're going to go to 10 or 11 o'clock tonight. And for what? We've already got a mask requirement.
So Ken and Jeff, I have a question. Do you not have any concerns with the state's ordinance or mandate expiring mid-January? And if we find ourselves in a position where, for whatever reason, that EO is not re-upped or it's rescinded and we don't think that's appropriate for happening, then we're back at square one?
You wanted to quote the state epidemiologist in our ordinance by name. Do you think that the epidemiologist isn't talking to the governor about whether to rescind the mask requirement or not?
Well,
I mean,
I do,
we're
but we
quite late in
yeah.
implementing
I
it
mean,
in the first place. I do think that they're a little behind the 8 ball.
I guess I think we put in the time, we've gotten input from the community to have a public hearing. I don't see the harm in having a public hearing next week. And
Yeah.
then we could decide to move forward or not. But I think that, you know, it makes more sense that we've put the time in, and we can continue to get feedback. But if we have our own, it protects us from having to worry about having to go through this whole rigmarole again if, you know, the state one is
But we
rescinded.
don't have to go through it now, Sabrina. Ken's right. We could push the public hearing to the end of December or the beginning of January before the governor's order expires and decide then.
All right, that's fair, because I'm worried about the date.
I
and
understand the timing aspect of it, but your goal has been accomplished by the governor with the stroke of a pen. There's a mask requirement. Can't find people.
Right.
That's not the issue.
So I actually would be fine with pushing the public hearing off if that's what others want to do. But I do think that it's important for us to have our own ordinance at this point. I mean, I think it might be a little bit confusing to push it off and have it a few weeks from now, but I don't know. Are others okay with that so that we can get ahead of that January 15th date?
I mean, I think my concern over relying solely on the state level one is that its scope is a little bit different than ours. The two kind of things that I saw in looking at it was that it I think only applied to 5 and up, and I think ours started at age 2, and it included some exceptions that probably didn't fit up with ours. So, you know, I'm fine. We can push our own public hearing into January, but you know, we should all understand that it's going to be, I think, a less broad mask ordinance than what we had drafted so far. And yeah, I think the biggest exception that was different than ours, let me see, I had it pulled up a second ago, is probably the one saying that religious, political, media, educational, cultural, musical, theatrical performances or any performance for an audience are exempted. So if we're comfortable not having, or if we're comfortable leaving that sort of an exemption in place until we feel like we need to take it up again, then I'm okay pushing out a public hearing until January and just waiting to see what the numbers are. And hopefully we'll have some indication from the state about what the governor is going to do, whether they're going to renew it or not, or change it, you know, whatever. But hopefully we'll know a little more at that time.
Yeah, I mean, I do think ours is a little bit tighter and slightly better drafted. And I do worry about, you know, the scope issue, I think, is real. So I don't want to waste too much time on this if people aren't on the same page, but I do want to be very clear. This is not about finding people. And I don't think that was a fair thing to say. So, so it sounds like Stephen and I are on the same page in terms of being okay with pushing off a public hearing. Would Jeff and Ken be willing to revisit it in a few weeks. And Anna, are you okay with that?
I'd be willing to push it off, whether to late December, early January timeframe, and we can see how well it's working out if it is.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm happy to revisit it. I just don't think we need to continue right now.
That's fine if that's a consensus of the board. I will, for the record, state though that I think being proactive is better than being reactionary. And at this moment, I think this mask mandate passed by the state is reactionary and should have happened a long time ago. I'd like to see our town be proactive about this and not wait until it's gone on too long. But I will go with the will of the board for now.
So quick logistical question, Neil, if, I don't have the calendar pulled up, but if we wanted to take this back up, could we just schedule a public hearing with the required notice at any point? I think it needs like 10 days in the paper or something.
Does, yes. So as long as we get the proper notice in.
And did we already notice the Monday, the 30th public hearing?
We did.
Yeah.
So we'll.
So we already noticed it. So, I mean, I don't see the harm with having the public hearing next Monday if we've already, that's what people think is going to happen anyway. So how do we, I guess we just have to like cancel it, put the notice out there that it's canceled now?
Yes, that's what, we'll post it that it's canceled.
Okay. Did we also have council look at our draft?
Yes. Which I haven't gotten back from them yet, but they do have
Okay.
it.
All right. How much of a pain is it to cancel the public meeting and then potentially just renotice another public meeting in a couple weeks? Is that
That's not that hard to do.
okay? I just want to make sure we're not creating more work unnecessarily for you since you have plenty on your plate. Okay, so we will cancel the meeting next Monday. I think we need to see how it goes with the state. And I totally agree with Anna that this is an area where we should not be reactive. We should be proactive. And this is not my first choice, but don't want to spend too much more time on this at this point. Okay, so we are done with other business. Ready to jump into the budget?
Unfortunately, yes. And let me start by saying I think we're a week or two behind a normal year, let's say, in terms of where we would be on the budget. So the way I envision proceeding tonight is at a starting point. I'd just like to get a feel for where everybody wants to end up. Do we want to look at a 0% increase, 3, 5, whatever, and recognizing that right now the booklet that Neil had provided starts us off at a 16% increase, but I believe due to some duplications Neil has found, it's about a 15%. Then we'd be reducing it significantly based on the amount of fund balance we'd be using. However, I want to point out that because of the new road bond that we'll be issuing in January or February and the refinancings, we're looking at an increase in interest in principal payments from 2021 to 2022 of $477,000. So to the extent we want to keep a fair amount of the fund balance to avoid a big tax jump in 2022, I think trying to somewhat levelize the tax rate makes a lot of sense. Once we've talked this in general terms about a target, I'd suggest we go through, in effect, all of the items in the book impacting the tax rate in order you can put all of your ideas on the table. If we can agree on some readily, that's great. And then I'll offer Neil and myself up that between now and next Monday, we'll sit down with your ideas and try to come up with a revised budget that somewhat meets the general targets we're looking at for presentation next week. And so I guess with that as an initial comment, do people think that's a reasonable way to proceed?
Ken, I'm pleased that you brought up the 2022 increase, because that was one of my biggest concerns when I realized that we're essentially only paying one debt service payment this year, and that it's going to double next year. And that, you know, that's a what, a 8% increase by itself. And so, you know, looking at more than just this year makes some sense to me.
I agree completely. Okay, not hearing anything.
Well, can I
Anybody?
sorry, Ken. I mean, I agree with wanting to look ahead to 2021 or 2022, excuse me. And that extra debt service payment is certainly a big one to keep in mind. Are you guys proposing or suggesting that, you know, as a result of that, we need to be as close to a flat budget as we can stomach?
Well, in a sense, we are very close to a flat budget. If you take out the 2% merit increase, the state mandated increase in of retirement, and the health insurance.
Yeah.
But we can't take those out. We're
We
stuck.
can, well, we certainly the merit is one we can talk about.
So Ken, can you, I guess I'm confused by where that 16% figure you mentioned comes from.
You said you had the book in front of you, Steve?
Yeah, I've got it.
Page 2 of 89, the bottom right.
Okay.
And that's taking everything into account.
Okay.
And like I said, one of the big things would reduce that is the use of the fund balance.
Right. Yeah, I was looking at the operating budget only. Okay, thank you.
So do people have a thought on where they would ideally like the percentage change in the tax rate to come out?
What was last year's kind of guidance from the budget committee? Was it 4% pre-pandemic?
I believe it was 4%. We were actually in the 7s. But
Okay.
Their direction was 4.
Okay. So they asked for 4 and we presented 7 and they agreed to that to be presented at town meeting, and then the pandemic hit and we went back to the drawing board.
Right. And the school was in this same 7 to 8% range. And
That's right.
they also came close to 0, let me say.
Okay.
Some of the other things in the past, the budget committee has talked about is what is the increase in Social Security. And if you look at 2019 and 20, between the two of them, it's just under 3%. So there's another thing to think in mind. And Neil, I would appreciate any thoughts you have too. I didn't mean to exclude you at all.
Are you looking for, you're really talking policy, which is really,
Fair enough. Each 1%, for rule of thumb, each 1% change in the tax rate is just under $50,000. So as a starting point, I'll throw out a 3% increase as a goal.
I was kind of thinking 3 to 5 in that ballpark.
Yeah. At this point, I have no idea if we can get to the 3 or 5 without really cutting into what I consider muscle.
Yeah.
That's what I was just going to ask. Do you have a sense of if our target is 3 to 5% from the budget that's proposed, what's the dollar amount that we need to find to trim?
Roughly 650,000.
That's massive.
It's massive. The first thing I was going to talk about once we got past this is the fund balance. And that's going to have a significant impact on that number. Well, if I just say, okay, we'll try to get it in the 3 to 5% range and move on, is that reasonable for now?
I think it's a good target. Hope we can get that.
Okay. Okay, why don't we move on then to page 3 of 89 is the fund balance. And Neil, if you could just explain why the balance at the end of 2019 was higher than we had anticipated.
I'll unmute. So here's the estimated. We always estimate, and we did not have the final audit numbers before, even before July when we did that. So we actually had much more revenue than we had budgeted for last year. And probably the biggest change, there was 267,000 that they had taken out of the unreserved fund balance in 2018 because of the library fire, that because of insurance reimbursements and everything was added back in 2019. So that was based 267,000 we did not anticipate. So that's kind of where the biggest changes were from what we were thinking. It's always good to have more fund balance than less fund balance.
Absolutely. Okay. And for this year 2020, I would use as a plug for right now the combination of revenue over budget and expense under budget to be roughly $100,000. Would you be comfortable with that?
I wouldn't put anything in at this point. I think it's too early.
Okay. There's only 6 weeks left in the year, though.
Right, but remember, everything is that much closer this year because we did it so much later.
Yeah, no.
Like revenue, we knew a lot. We had a lot more information, and we were able to budget much more closely.
Okay, if we leave that, then is it an open or blank item for the time being? You're showing that the estimated fund balance available for use in 2021 is 547,000. Now,
that is as of now, and it is actual, yes.
What's the 5% retainage number? What does that mean?
So DRA requires towns to keep at least 5%, and we're able to keep only 5% because people actually pay their taxes very well. As your fund balance, because that fund balance includes uncollected taxes and that too. And we collect all the money. That's 5% of the total amount we collect, but we have to pay the precincts, the school, and the county, even if we don't collect the taxes. So that's included in that amount.
Thanks.
Yeah. So bearing in mind that we want to carry over a significant amount of fund balance into for use in 2022 for the reasons we previously discussed, I would throw out right now that maybe we should look at 350,000 as to be used for 2021 to offset taxes. What do people think about that?
So Ken, using these numbers, that would leave us with roughly 200,000 for 2022.
Correct, plus whatever revenue over budget or expense under budget for 2020 as well as 2021 turn out to be.
Okay.
How are the taxes coming in? Are they on track, Neil?
They are. It's a little hard to tell early because so many people's taxes now are escrowed and they come all at once in big checks, but certainly checks have been coming in.
But they weren't really much higher for the June billing, right?
They were, collections were a little better than usual in
Okay.
July.
That's what I thought, but I just wanted to be sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think this billing will be more telling.
Yeah. I mean, for what it's worth, again, the unemployment rate in Hopkinton is in the 2s now. Okay. Well, if we use 350,000, that's roughly a 7% reduction in the proposed tax increase. Okay.
My only concern with that, Ken, and Stephen sort of alluded to it, is how's that going to affect us for 2022 budgeting?
Yeah.
If we use 350 this year, we're kicking it down the road, and we could end up with a much bigger increase next year if revenue doesn't meet expectations or expenses exceed expectations.
It's absolutely true. And I don't know what the answer is going to be. Just thinking in terms of if we want to get to the 3 to 5%, we've got to take a big chunk out of fund balance.
And how does, in thinking to 2022, if we're assuming that these numbers are, we're using these as this is the best numbers we have right now. Is that 5% retainage going to change in 2021? In other words, are we going to have to hold back more next year than we are for this year? Reducing what we have available for fund balance in 2022.
I would anticipate it all depends on what's appropriated. So this year, the tax rate changed very little given all the entities. So the amount stayed basically the same. If there's a huge increase next year in the town, the school, or the precinct budgets, there could be some increase, but I would not anticipate it being huge.
Okay.
It has stayed pretty much in the same area, even as it hasn't gone up significantly from year to year, even through the years.
Because Neil has the ability to change the numbers and thus change the tax impact as we talk, I'd be comfortable in saying 300,000 instead of 350, and then see what that brings us down the road. If that's what people are more comfortable with.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I just worry about us having 200,000 left over after holding back that 5% retainage. So yeah, we can take a look at what 300,000 looks like instead of 350 for this year.
So 10.59%. Okay. Neil, what about the valuation? Is there any, does it make any sense to revise that?
No, not at this point. There's probably will be some value added, but that's hard to know. So I think we've stuck with leaving it as the previous years for our estimation.
Okay. Okay. People okay? Should I move on?
Yeah, thanks, Ken.
Okay. If we can go to revenues now, Neil. Okay. I guess I'll quickly just go through each item and ask if anybody would like to propose any changes to it, or when we get to ones I'm thinking about, I'll speak up. So the first one is land use change tax. Anybody proposing a change to that? Okay, to the yield tax.
And there's like 150 lines. You may not want to go through each one.
I want to somehow make sure that everybody has an opportunity to provide their input. So I guess I can do it differently, that say that on my side, well, the main things on revenue, or I agree, unfortunately, with Neil, that we have to reduce the state room and meals and block grant by 20%, because we don't know what we're going to get from the state, and we've got to zero out municipal aid for the same reason. The only, let's see, the changes that I saw as potential were maybe planning board fees, maybe raising that by 1,000, zoning board fees by just a small amount of over 100. The building permit fees by about 5,000. The Webster ambulance share, I think we should be raising that. I think Neil was going to be looking into that a little bit further to get some more information, and similarly to raise the Warner ambulance share. I also think in terms of sewer user fees that, as I've said before, that I think they should, the users should pay half of the amount that we were planning to put into capital reserves.
That would not go in the budget, just to be clear. The only revenue that goes in the budget for sewer is the offset. Any additional revenues they get stays in the sewer account. So that you can't change that.
Okay, it would reduce the amount we'd have to put into the reserves.
Yes.
Okay. Yep, you're absolutely correct. I'd also raise the amount for the Webster transfer station we talked about the other day. I think it was a question about raising the tipping fee at the transfer station for commercial. We'd want to look
That's,
into that.
that's already built in there.
It is the increase. Okay.
So the number we have accounts for that already, Neil?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
So what happens if you change these revenues and then you don't meet your revenue target, then when you set the tax rate in September or October, your revenues are down and your tax rate's going to go up. So be ready if you're going to cut these proposed or add to these proposed revenues, that if we don't make it, you're not going to meet what you told people at town meeting that the tax rate will be. I just want to be clear about that.
And on the flip side, if the state does not cut 20%, that's to the better.
That's correct. And you can always choose to have a lower rate or use less fund balance at that point. But if you don't have the revenues, I suppose you could use more fund balance. You can, but you have less options if you don't meet your revenue targets.
Okay. Does anybody else have any thoughts on revenues?
You ticked off the ones that I had in mind, Ken, which was the planning board, zoning board, and building permit ones, because I thought those were a little on the conservative side.
Mhm.
But those are the ones that jumped out at me. And then I guess we're waiting to hear if it's possible to increase the ambulance share from Webster and Warner.
Right. I just got the yearly run sheet information, but those numbers are pretty close. I don't think they're going to be up much.
Anybody else?
Possible that our rent from Bates might go up, but I don't think we can change that.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's going to be significant if it does go up.
Believe that was assumed to be 400 a year throughout for the full year.
Right, based on what we have now.
Okay, should I move on?
So where are we at with these? Did you make changes? Did you not make changes?
It sounds like you and I are going to sit down and argue about what appropriate changes are and then present them next Monday. Unless people are ready at this point to agree on something, on some of the things.
I think what you suggested for planning board, zoning board fees makes sense. Agreeing also with Stephen. Building permit fees, I would be hesitant to go up as much as you mentioned, but increasing by a couple thousand, I think would be fine.
So planning board fees go up 1,000.
Sure.
So are you looking at the other years? It was 4,200 and 3,900 and 3,800. We're only at 6,200 now. So you'd like to go to 7?
I'll say yes.
And what is that based on, Ken? Just the hunch that people are building more?
This year's actuals.
I know, but, okay, so I guess year-to-date brings us through the end of September.
I mean, we can be very conservative and, and then we're at a 10% increase, you know, that's why I'm, you know, trying to be somewhat aggressive.
The whole point is the revenues are what the revenues are. So you're still going to be at that same point, whether you put in, if you don't meet them in September when the revenues have to be redone, then they have to be adjusted. Just to be aware of that.
Right. I'm just thinking about what Neil said, like, if we don't meet our targets, we don't meet our targets. There's no backing off from that. And I'd rather be in a position of being conservative on revenue and lucking out in a few places than the other way around.
I mean, if that's the general consensus, that's fine. We can just leave revenues alone and go from there.
Well, it might not be the consensus. That's just that's just
Yeah.
me.
What's been the historic additions to the property values? Do we know how much property values grow in it? Not in a reval year, because we all know how that went. But in terms of new additions, you know, I know we've approved 15 houses.
Today's been a better year. This year has been a good year.
Right.
Usually 5 to 10 million in a non-reval year.
And this budget doesn't assume any increase, is that, or this tax rate, I'm sorry.
That is correct. That could be adjusted, but in that tax rate does not assume any increase.
Right. So if we assume, I don't know, what's the total assessed valuation? Anybody know?
780, 889, 991.
So if we assume 1% growth, what does that do to our increase? Yeah, it's $7.5 million. Sounds so easy when I say it.
Neil, could you just go back to the summary page and plug that in?
I seem to have lost my mouse. Here, let me grab a battery. Sorry.
I'm thinking a 1% increase in the valuation comes out to about a 1% reduction in the tax rate. But we'll let Neil be the expert.
So add 1%.
So just over 1%. Well, I'd be fine with using that 1% increase in the valuation and leaving revenues as they are now alone.
Yeah, I like that better.
Is everybody else okay with that approach?
Okay with that. We'll run through the building permits just to make sure that's in line.
Okay. Okay, so at the moment, we're at 9.5%. I believe the next page is warrant articles. Yeah. It's page 9 of 89. I was looking on the paper. And as I understand these, the only addition from what was there last year and is the financial software. Is that correct, Neil?
That's the only thing that's not a capital reserve or trust. Yes. And
Okay,
that is to replace what we use for financial software, which we heard from our former treasurer that was needed. So, but that's something, what we have works. It's not being updated. It is being maintained. So I'll leave that for what it's worth.
so you're saying it works, and then it's not as though our auditors or anybody are saying you have to replace it.
That is correct. But there are so many new ways that things are done, such as ACHs and things like that, as well as having the module to reconcile correctly in the new software that isn't in the current. So, but yes, this is what we're using is what we've been using for 13 years. It was 2007, I think they switched to that.
And do we know if we went ahead with this new software, would it save us any money elsewhere?
It should save, once it's up and running, it should save time.
Yeah.
Substantially. I think it should be more accurate. But as far as, yes, reconciling and things like that, it should be a substantially less time to do that. So.
And has our current treasurer kind of offered the same sort of concerns?
He hasn't been here long enough to sort of have that sense yet, I don't think.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's a big issue. That's, again, over 1% increase in the tax rate. What do people think of eliminating that or having that for now?
I'm not sure how you have it.
Well, put the money in reserve.
I was gonna ask, could we get by one more year, put half in this year and the other half next year?
Yes, we'd have to figure out how to do that.
Couldn't we just create another capital reserve for that purpose?
Yeah, we probably could, a trust, a maintenance.
Or something, yeah.
Like the library technology trust, we do a town technology.
Could do a trust.
I guess I'm okay having it for now, but kind of flagging it to maybe come back to depending on where we end up.
Okay, I think that makes sense. Other thoughts?
I'm a little confused by some of this because the last two columns have some mistakes in them. So it's hard to get a good read on it.
you be more specific?
Where specifically?
Sure. Recreation facilities CRF went from 20,000 to 75,000, shows 100% increase. That's more like a 250% increase.
It went from, hang on, let me make sure I'm in the right. The recreation, here we are. 20.
Yeah, looks like it's correct on your screen, Neil.
So it went from 20 to 75,
Yep.
which is
The printed copy says it's 100% increase.
okay. Maybe that never got changed. It's 275. Are you seeing what I'm seeing?
Yeah, the next one down, the printed copy is not right.
Well, even on this copy, the revaluation CRF,
Went from 0 to 22.
yeah, that's way more than 100% increase. I mean, I guess my question is, the town facilities trust fund is up 300%. The rec facilities CRF is up 275%. Those are pretty hefty increases.
Jeff, if maybe we should jump to the spreadsheets in the back of the booklet, because they provide more detail on the specifics. And there, I guess the first page starts with the capital reserve is the ambulance CRF. And goes from there. Have you had a chance to look at those spreadsheets and maybe if you could ask your questions there would be helpful.
Can we go in order as they're listed on page 9 and start with recreation facilities?
We certainly can try to.
I'll keep us honest.
Okay. Okay. Recreation facilities on the spreadsheet is on page 3 of 4. Okay, Neil's got it up.
So have
So
we
that-
got reimbursed from the school for all of the work at George's Park so far?
The work they're paying for, they paid for directly.
So all of the materials, they paid for half of it?
They paid for the drainage off of the road itself up until where the school driveway starts is ours. And then they paid for all the drainage work from there on off their parking lot.
Yeah, we paid for the road and I believe that was about $22,000 plus our labor, and Neil and Dan are trying to get a handle for a request from the budget committee on what the labor cost was that we spent there. But as far as recreation facilities are concerned, what's planned for 2021 is $50,000 for Park Avenue irrigation, and then the following year, 100,000 for the bathrooms, etc. And last year we cut the appropriation down to $20,000, and this year the proposal, which we haven't discussed yet, is to go up to 75,000 as a way to start putting more money into it to do the different upgrades at George Park.
And again, I'm asking out of ignorance more than anything.
No,
I
that's,
understood that this was a joint effort of the school and the town.
I've been the one that's proposed giving or leasing George Park to the school. But I think one of the studies we had done said, okay, maybe the school should pay a third, the town a third, and raise a third independently from outside sources.
That discussion was around the actual track, which is, I'm not even sure it's, you see
I
it.
thought it was around the
2030.
entire master plan.
No,
Okay, I
it
misunderstood.
it hasn't been. That could certainly be discussed, but it was around that final, this, well, oh, you can't.
Phase 4 or 5 or something like that.
Yeah, the last phase was the one that was done a third, which is the 700. This is just the town share of that. That's the big phase if that gets done.
And as far as the more immediate concern is, okay, they're looking for $50,000 to do irrigation at Park Avenue, and the following year, $100,000 for bathrooms at George Park. If we think those two projects are appropriate, then we'd have to put 75 in this year and 93 in next year. And if we reduce the 75 when we think the projects are appropriate, then we'd have to put more in 2022, which defeats the purpose of trying to even out levelize the tax rate.
Looks like as it stands now, 2022 is going to be a big jump up from this year.
18,000 more, or are you talking total?
I'm talking total.
Yes. I mean, in part due to the what I've talked about before with the bond payments.
Right, right.
So do people think that we should keep 75 going into as the appropriation for recreational facilities, or do something else?
Neil, do you or does anybody else on the board have a better handle on what the Park Avenue field irrigation, what component or what part that plays and kind of the plan to redevelop the fields there?
Because this is the Park Avenue field, largely grass does not grow well unless it's watered. That's what it comes down to. So they've been using it the way it is, and this was put in the plan a bunch of years ago to try to improve that field.
So if I'm reading this right, what we're sending to CRF and expendable trust funds is going up by a third this year.
You talking total, Jeff?
Yeah, 26% is what's in here right now.
Well, again, that number is different than what's in my printed book here, Neil. Go back to the page you were just on a second ago.
The fund flow.
No, it's proposed warrant articles. I think it's on the same spreadsheet, but it's a different page. The warrant articles tab, maybe. So we're going from 748 to 1,118,000. Is that what I'm seeing correctly? Am I seeing that correctly?
Oh, yeah.
748, right there we are,
Yep, to
1,118,000.
748 to 943, basically. The individual warrant articles include the two special revenue funds, which are a wash. So minus the if you took out the 61.3, which is making this more confusing, isn't it?
So it goes from 748 to 943.
Correct. Going into capital reserves. I don't know why there's not an amount here.
It was the and that just seems like a significant increase that we may not be able to afford. I don't know where to cut it. I'm not picking out any department. It's a big number.
Well, unfortunately, the thing there is we have to pick out which area to cut.
Yeah, I think we need to keep looking at each CRF and continue on through to know what we're actually thinking of spending money on.
Neil, on the recreation facilities, before we move on, can you just refresh our memory? 'Cause I remember, I mean, we've been having discussions about George Park and like the big plan for a while now, but is some of this work done in-house? And then I remember we got some quotes for things like the bathrooms, but I don't remember if that's all just, if these are just estimates that we had from past discussions or if they were based on something more firm.
Especially these are really estimates.
And
They did a full study and there were estimates done then, and those are the numbers that we've used, but they are estimates because there's still enough years out that we don't have certainly.
right, okay. So it's possible we could do bathrooms for less than 100 grand, but that's just what we've pinned.
Right.
Right, okay.
And see what happens is things get changed from year to year. You end up, it bunches up. So then you have to readjust further
Right.
years out to unbunch them, I guess.
When's the last time these were updated?
Well, they're updated every year, but the last time was really a year ago. They were largely changed. This year is basically the same as last year. But I think historically at this time, things have been adjusted, looked at, and it's been reviewed what really needs to be done, what can be moved off, and it's adjusted that way.
And so in 21, if we have 50 grand for irrigation, is that something that like our people do, or is that something we put out for the contractor?
A little bit of both. We can do
Okay.
some in-house, but if it's putting in a well, that we cannot do.
Okay.
So that's hired out.
And I assume, I know we had conversations about like the order of operations with this project. And so there's a reason why irrigation is next in the timeline.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Is George Park on town water for irrigation, and they have a separate well?
They have a separate well that was put in 4 or 5 years ago to get it to not actually, and there hasn't been the need to, well, this year there has been, there hadn't been the need to stop the watering and things like that, to do the water bans since that happened, and using non-treated water. So that has paid for itself pretty quickly.
Sure.
It
We
is,
keep going down the, sorry, Ken, go ahead.
I was going to say, there's always the possibility, I guess, for when we get to 2022, that we could fund the bathrooms over 2 years as opposed to one, and as a way to levelize things there.
And possibly do it for less than 100,000.
Yeah. Which would mean maybe we could just appropriate 50,000 in 2021 for the irrigation at Park Avenue. Okay.
I was gonna suggest that we look at some of the other CRFs that are big increases.
Absolutely. We sort of got off kilter. Okay. Stephen, what did you want to look at next?
The transfer station equipment one.
That's the replacement. We have the 3 trailers, and scheduled in 2021 is the replacement of one of those trailers. And I think the reason it's so high is because it was zeroed last year.
That's correct. And and that's just the Hopkinton share.
That's correct.
And is this the trailer Dan mentioned that if we don't properly replace it, it's like a disaster? He was talking about like loading becomes dangerous, I think.
Right. And we do get much better rates having our own trailers, and that analysis has been done a couple of times that show that.
Okay. Going down the increases, I've talked about the sewer equipment sludge removal a number of times already. The revaluation, where we have to revalue every 5 years, we normally put 1/5 of the cost in each year, and I believe last year we just zeroed it out as a way to help the tax rate, right after the valuation. But if we don't put it in now, we're going to get hit with double the following year or sometime thereafter.
The library technology trust fund.
There we go. Yeah, that one looks like it's building a balance.
Yeah.
We could, in effect, zero that one out as far as appropriation is concerned. And it would still carry through at least 2025 without any appropriation.
Haven't we had past conversations about the library and their other sources of funding?
Yeah, we had that well, last week or the week before with Donna, and I had asked about the building access, and if the foundation could pay a portion of those costs, and I, I was thinking, well, we could potentially cut that appropriation slightly.
I think, Stephen, I can't remember. I think you were around for this. We had a discussion a couple years ago after the fire with respect to them using like insurance money to do certain, I don't know, repairs or whatever. And so we did cut, and I remember it was not appreciated because I think we miscalculated a little bit and assumed that more was going to be done with the insurance payments, but we were off base in our assumptions.
Yeah. I do remember that.
Well, part of the question there is, do we think the library needs a major building access improvement project that over the 3 years would amount to $85,000?
I'm not remembering this conversation. Did we discuss this in detail?
I wouldn't say in detail, but I had asked Donna about the building access and why the taxpayer should be paying all of it as opposed to the foundation paying a portion of it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe she indicated that the foundation felt that that was the responsibility of the town, that the foundation had other responsibilities. I don't know, Neil, if you would phrase it differently than that.
No, I think that matches what was said.
But if, to the extent we're looking at what the town needs versus what the town wants, because I feel we have a need to keep the tax increase low, does this fall as a need or a want?
Me, it's a want.
I mean, at this point in time, I'd probably put it in the want as well.
Okay. And all I would suggest doing this year is reducing the amount going into building library building systems by $5,000.
Probably the better way is if you're pushing it off, the reconfiguring, we should move it out or eliminate it if it's and keep the, you know what I mean? Because if you're moving the
Push both of those out by a year.
yeah, because then that keeps them. Because if you do that, then you get these numbers and you can tell much better. So you can cut 10,000 here and still have
Right.
a balance.
Well, I'd like where Neil's coming from.
Yeah, I like that.
Because it only works if you kind of do the whole thing.
Okay. Okay. and another big item, I think certainly worth discussion, not sure which line item it's in, is the Houston barn. And it's something that every year we've pushed off for quite a few years now, and I've certainly looked at the roof there, and I'm not sure we can continue pushing it off. But I certainly wanted to see what other people thought.
Fund is that in? Is that the town maintenance?
Trust, yeah.
It is in the town maintenance trust, the last page of the.
Last page. There it is. Okay, thank you.
Ken, on this one, do you have a sense of the overall condition of the building, not just the roof?
I'd say it's not too great. I don't know if Neil would be a better one to answer that.
Sure, it's an old barn. There's holes in the floor. It's a typical old barn. So, and I know there's been discussion back and forth of whether, without any conclusion, I think, whether how much it should be maintained and how much it should not be maintained. And but clearly what does in an old barn is the roof or lack thereof. So if we're going to maintain it, the roof is definitely the first thing that would have to be done. The foundation has had some work a bunch of years ago, but probably will need more eventually. Old barns are expensive to maintain.
I'm familiar.
And it's not the ideal building for what it's used for either, storage and stuff, but it keeps things dry most of the time.
Do we know if we're at a point, like if we don't do the roof, like we're talking about like collapse?
I don't think it would collapse. What happens is once a roof really leaks a lot, then you start to get rot and deterioration inside. That would be a long time before collapse, but you're headed down that road once you don't have a roof. And that roof was redone, I think it was like 12 or 15 years ago. It's been redone once in the not too distant future.
Well, if it only lasted 12 years, we shouldn't use that contractor again.
Yeah, no, I don't think it was 12. I think it was more than that, but.
Was the whole roof done? Because I think it's the north side that seems to be weathering things the worst.
I think it was, and that side that's so bad is really the one that gets beat on. The sun is on it and the wind comes through there. So I think the whole thing was done, but they have deteriorated substantially more on that one side than the other.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would be in favor for now of putting this off just because it's 1%, 1.5% by itself. And it just feels like a lot of money to spend in this climate.
Again, if we put it off this year, that just puts more pressure on next year.
I mean, yeah, I know. I remember last year, the same conversation. It's a lot of money.
We don't have anything programmed after 3 years. So we could cut this to $60,000 for the next 4 years and cover everything.
And
doesn't give Neil flexibility to do any other projects.
It actually gets at a question that I've been thinking about, which is where is the CIP committee on all of this? When's the last time they had a chance to look at this? What was their discussion? And is it worth hearing more about the thinking behind all of this?
Yeah, they don't do maintenance trusts, they do the capital reserves. But because these are not capital projects, these are maintenance, they do not review these. But we should get from them updates on the other capital reserves, certainly.
Neil,
Sorry, Ken.
I was going to say, Neil, do you see any significant problem in Jeff's proposal of cutting the appropriation to 60,000 theoretically for the next 3 years?
No. I think in general, one of the goals, one of the goals has been to get this funded on a regular basis enough to truly maintain the buildings. And how long it takes us to get to that point is that hard question to answer when you're sitting here doing each year. So
I was just going to ask about the 80,000 and when we last got, like, where that estimate came from and how up to date it is.
that was probably a couple years ago now. The estimate on that.
Construction prices are dramatically higher over the past 12 months, for sure.
Yeah, they have jumped this year.
Yeah.
And have we gotten to the point where, I mean, I assume like other parts of that building need to be addressed, not just the roof. And have we like explored like the type of materials that would go on the roof? Like if it would be wood, metal?
I think not wood, but asphalt and
Right.
metal have been looked at. The metal would certainly last longer, but there's some fear of how fast the snow would come down
Mm-hmm.
on a metal roof in an area that is heavily used.
Yeah.
So that could certainly be looked at.
But the bottom line is if we push this off, you think we can, I mean, it's not ideal. And I feel like that building gets pushed off every year, but structurally, we think we can like squeeze out another year or so.
I think it is what it is, and you know what it is. And
Yeah, it'll just be a bad, I mean, I just don't want like the roof collapsing fully and dealing with like a disaster there.
and if it is funded at like 60,000, if we had to do one side, we'd do one side. Although that would cost more to not do it at once, but there are possibilities.
Okay, so just to get a handle on where we are, Neil, which items did you change and what does that do to the tax increase?
I believe we're currently at 8.36.
Okay, it's certainly going in the right direction.
I think we could probably take 10,000 out of the transfer and still get them their trailer.
And is that based on your knowledge of cost of trailers, Jeff, or where are you coming from?
Yeah, we could.
It's just the total in the account compared to
Okay.
the cost of the trailer.
Yeah.
Okay, now, before you leave this page that you have up there, Neil, financial software, I thought we agreed to go with half of it.
We did. Which is.
And then in sewer equipment sludge removal, I was proposing, again, going with half there. I don't know if others agree with me or not.
You thinking that the precinct covers the other half, or are you thinking pushing it off a year?
Not the precinct, the users.
Okay.
That probably doubles rates. Just not quite. That's 50%. Nope. Just be aware of that.
Well, it's just that, to me, it's an equity issue. Should the whole town be paying for the sludge removal costs, or should the users be paying half of it or some proportion of it?
Or all of it?
Oh, I wouldn't use all, because my understanding, it was, when it was originally built, it was oversized with the expectation that more users will be coming onto the system at some point. And hopefully, once the Economic Development Committee gets Exit 6 really developed, then there'll be more demand. And, at that point, I'd agree with you. Let's go to 100%. But until
No
that
pressure,
happens,
guys. Well, the flip side of that argument, Ken, is nobody else is generating sludge except for the existing users of the system. Now, I don't know when the last time it was done, if it's been done in the last 20 years. It's not necessarily fair to someone who just moved into one of those houses to pay for something that's occurred over the last 10 or 12 or 15 years. But the reality is the sewer users generate the sludge.
I can accept your argument for 100%. On the flip side, I'd be afraid of too much of a rate shock on the users.
But I think it's something that needs to be discussed with the precinct.
Just it's not the precinct. It's the precinct. I think doesn't have anything to do with it. It's the users of the sewer system.
So who set? Do we set their rate?
There is a committee that's a sewer committee, and I think one of the last meetings, Neil indicated he didn't think they had met in the last year. And I raised this issue last year, and last year I believe the select board, cut the amount that was going into that by half, using the same rationale I'm using now.
But who sets the sewer rate, Neil?
The select board.
The select board. Okay,
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yep. At public hearing.
So Ken, you're proposing, or Jeff, you're proposing Ken, you want to half it, and Jeff, you want to eliminate it altogether?
I'd like us to move towards eliminating it with the rate setting over the next several years.
Okay.
So
I don't want to cause problems, but I, as a guy who lives out in the middle of nowhere, shouldn't be subsidizing people who are on town sewer. In most communities, that's an enterprise fund. It's run separately. They have their own budget, and they have to pay for their operation.
So to try to move forward on this one, And Jeff, would you be comfortable if we cut the appropriation in half and we set a future select board meeting when we'll be addressing what the change
Sure.
in rate should be?
Sure.
I like that approach.
Okay. Then getting back to the summary page, is there anything else on the warrant articles that we discussed that should get changed at this point?
So we left recreation facilities as is. We didn't touch the Park Ave irrigation.
Yeah, do we want to revisit that page or?
What's the tax summary, Neil? Can you just tell us where we're at right now?
Sure. 6.82, 43 cents.
So- So if we cut the appropriation for recreation facilities to 50, that would give enough money to do Park Avenue Field and another year to get a better understanding of the costs of the bathrooms, or if they should be done over more than 1 year, and if the cost should be shared.
It looks like you probably then should push that off a year. You're gonna, or decide to divide it out now.
Mhm. Okay, I'll suggest we make that 50 for 2022 and 2023. And for 2021, we reduce the 75 to 50.
I like that approach.
Yeah. And I think we should be looking at what the cost of the bathrooms are, and if the town should be shouldering all of it, or if the school should be paying a share, or if fundraising can cover some of it.
Nothing like a good bathroom fundraiser.
How about the Donahue, and I won't say the next word.
A flush fund.
Okay. Okay, with that, are we ready to move on to the regular operating expenses?
Think so.
So
Okay. Okay, just as sort of a comments to start, if I take out borrowing costs, they're increasing by about $137,000. And the major drivers are the state retirement system for 50, health insurance for 31, and a 2% merit increase for 55. So other things we're looking at are very small by comparison. Let's see. So if we,
So is just for clarification, because it's my first time, is the merit increase a permanent increase or a quote unquote bonus?
it's a permanent increase, and that was one of the thoughts I raised initially, if we wanted to go with a merit increase or a bonus this time.
Well, and we discussed back when we didn't have a budget that we'd given people raises and didn't want to take them back in a year when much of the rest of the state was dealing with cuts versus keeping their existing salary. And I know that we said at the time, we'll have to look at it in the 2021 budget.
Absolutely correct.
So here we are.
Okay. So I guess we can just initially jump on that because it's a big item. Jeff, are you proposing no merit increase or a bonus instead, or?
I don't have I certainly think if there's the opportunity for a bonus, it makes more sense for us, not necessarily for the employees, and I get that. I'm sure I'll get a couple of emails tomorrow. But, you know, again, I think we gave raises last year. I don't know how much it was. Maybe Neil knows.
It was a 3%.
3%.
Last year.
3%. Okay. And, you know, it was a time when if we had known, I'm not sure we would have given those increases. I don't think we laid anybody off as a result of COVID. I think everybody kept their jobs and kept their salaries. We have one employee that went to part-time. I think that's the only, and tell me if I'm wrong, Neil, but I think that's the only negative personnel impact of COVID.
Yes, I would say that's correct.
And if we, if say we went to a bonus of just across the board bonus of $200 for full-time employees, we have what, about 40 employees, Neil?
Right. I'm not sure. Why would you bother?
Well,
You're dealing it across.
I agree with Jeff, and I've certainly heard the concerns about, we gave 3% last year, and I guess the school didn't give any, but I'd like to do something for our employees. And that's why I was thinking a bonus, and you know, $200 is certainly not significant to us, but to some, I imagine, of our lower paid employees, it certainly is.
Can we take a look at what happens to our overall numbers? I mean, I agree. Like, I think last year was sort of, I guess, awkward is the right word, because we had promised this increase, but it was certainly a time of turmoil for lots of people. And I think most people were just pleased to keep their jobs and weren't expecting pay increases, but it sort of was the situation we were in. So I don't want to be the one to suggest we zero it out, but I'm just curious to see what it looks like.
Zeroed out.
What'd you say?
I said, you don't want to be the one to suggest it, but you want to know what the impact of zeroing out is.
Yeah, it's true.
Well,
I'm
it's
curious to know that as well. It's going to be like a percentage, roughly.
slightly over.
Yeah.
And, you know, again, I'm the new guy. Employees pay what for health insurance and dental insurance and all the other insurances?
Well, yeah, that's another consideration is, you know, it's not anyone's fault, but cost of healthcare. And I think we still provide pretty good benefits.
What percentage do they pay, Neil?
10%.
10%.
Yeah.
Pretty good deal. I mean, the better financial approach for us long-term is to increase that percentage.
Oh, and I think we've been working in that direction. But certainly if we just kept the health insurance policy for employees as is with the percentage as is, that's actually a benefit to them.
Yeah, if I had to pick between the two for this year, I think I would say keep the health benefits the way they are and have a year where there's no merit wage pool.
And the health insurance, as shown here, is about a $31,000 increase over last year's budget. And Neil, is the wage pool number already grossed up for Social Security and things like that?
Yeah, all of that's included.
Okay. Oh. Well, is the consensus that we eliminate any merit wage increase this year?
I mean, I hate to say it conceptually because I think, employee morale is real and people have done a great job adjusting this year. But it does feel like of all the years to understand why we would not be able to do a wage increase, I would hope people would understand sort of the position we're in and yeah. And all these costs that we don't have control over going up.
And I would just add to Ken's point, I mean, the operating budget is already pretty lean overall. I think our increase on the operating budget is what, like a 1.5%, something like that. And that takes into account all those increases that we don't have control over. Or is it a little further up? But yeah, so it's even less there.
Oh, that's misleading in the sense that includes a reduction in interest payments, I believe.
Okay. But I guess my point is if we can't kind of reduce some of these bigger ticket ones, then it's going to be hard to equal the same amount going through the operating budget.
Mhm. Okay. Okay, so for the time being, should we zero that out and continue?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, then I'm not hearing anything different.
Everybody else is afraid to say it.
Yeah.
I think we have consensus on that.
Yeah, okay. Okay, the first item actually I had for the different departments was town clerk, tax collector, proposing where it was including doing professional services, 2 books for 6,000. I was thinking of going to 1 book, which is actually 1 more than we had last year, saving $3,000.
I'm just curious, do we know how many books there are or we need in the long term?
There's probably more than 20.
Okay.
And so many were getting done every year, but the ball got dropped a few years in there. There was
I
money.
assume we're doing the oldest first.
Yes, and the very oldest have been done, so it's working out.
I support that, Ken.
Yep.
I said I support that going from 6 to 3.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else have anything on town clerk tax collector? Okay, my next one then is in the finance. And that is to eliminate the GASB 75.
Yeah.
Okay, my next one is in assessing. And this brings up, it's more of a question at this point. Was the law changed with regards to utility assessing such that we need Sanssouci for $12,000 to do utility assessing contract?
That is the amount to do the cell towers and what assessing work on utilities there is. I checked with them, and that is the amount. And we're under contract, I think, for 2 more years.
Okay, I'll drop that one. Okay, my next one
Really
is
really quickly before we move on, the finance situation that we just cut, that is not a must-have, right?
It is not.
Okay, thanks.
my next one is legal. And that's to simply cut the 20,000 proposed to 15. The same as last year's budget.
What's the driver for the big number in 2018?
I'd have to
Base
look back. I
building?
don't remember.
Getting sued.
Yeah, all it takes is one ZBA case. I think it was a ZBA case. I think it was the horse farm,
Oh, yeah.
the riding ring. So
Okay. My next one's planning.
I just want to note on record that we had kept that kind of at 25 for quite a while. We cut it to 20, so and 15. That's where you want to go. That's good, but that's fine with me. But I just want it noted that, well, hopefully that works.
Yeah. Kind of rolling the dice a little bit.
Mhm.
Everybody behave.
Okay. My next one is planning. Professional services. The New England document scanning to just do half of those. Cut 2250 out. Okay, I'm assuming silence means agreement.
I think that's probably a safe assumption.
Okay. Okay. Next, I have government buildings, and there, the first is a question, Neil. I don't know if you had a chance to look at. We talked about for the Bates Building and the telephone, and about if it could be a hotspot instead, and if that would save us money.
Not really. You still have that cost, and I don't think you want your checklists done via that way.
Okay, the other questions I have relate to the Slusher Center, propane and cleaning. And, part of this is we just don't know how much the Slusher Center is going to be open or not. But say in terms of a fireplace for the Slusher Center, how much do we, are people going to be hanging around there in January, February, March, that they're going to be using a fireplace? And, similarly, we have cleaning for the Slusher Center, and where it's going to be certainly less activity than in a normal year. Should we be reducing that?
Except if you're going to have people in there, even leading Zoom classes, you have to do as much, if not more, cleaning during these times. Just keep that in mind.
We haven't done any, have we?
We have not to this point, no.
And do I recall correctly that we're going to be hearing back in January what the rec committee or the senior committee recommends?
Well, they're actually moving forward with not the phase of actually opening, but the leaders, they're being trained to use Zoom for the exercise. So they'll start to do that. So the leader themselves will be in the building because they don't have that access at home, and starting to lead like exercise classes that way. So those are starting before the end of the year.
Okay.
Is that going to be
Doing any other kind of Zoom meetings for seniors?
They were talking about, it all depends on who will lead it. They were talking about doing like a coffee type just chat thing too. I'm not sure where that's at, but I think that was offered to people to do. So that's certainly a possibility. And maybe it's going on and I just don't know. I know they discussed it, and I think
from what I have heard, the isolation of COVID is the worst piece. And, if it was jump on and just shoot the bull for half an hour, that could make the difference for some people.
Yeah, and I think that's what they're setting up. And we've even talked about, can we provide people with a device? We have some old devices or something that people that don't have them could do that too. So they're working on that too.
To Ken's point earlier, I think I agree that the propane for the Slusher Center probably doesn't need to be at 1,200, just because even if there are people in there leading Zoom classes,
they won't be using it.
Yeah, they're not going to be using that.
It doesn't need to be up by 50%.
So, I mean, I would even put that down to, like 300 or 400, maybe even less.
Well, it's the stove too.
I mean, are there plans to do any?
I'm not allowed to use that.
Yeah, any cooking in there?
They're doing lunch every week.
They do, okay. Well, I would cut it in half then. And take it to 6. And then on the cleaning, is it possible if, I understand the need to clean some portions of the building so that the Zoom can happen, but is it possible to reduce it and tell the cleaners to target only certain areas?
Yes, and it all depends. This would be the normal year's contract, so that's in here. So it's hard to know.
Yeah.
And we've only spent $2,700 in 10 months.
We stopped the professional cleaners when we closed.
Is the floor cleaning like a thing that's part of the contract? Because it seems like with less foot traffic, we could at least cut.
Yeah, actually, they're in the process. They'll be replacing the floors with donations, so that
Oh.
that probably definitely can come out.
Maybe we should just continue on.
Well, I just would ask if it's only being used for Zoom classes for 3 months, does the other half of the building have to be cleaned?
Yeah, it does seem like an awful lot for.
Yeah, and it's hard to know when it will be fully open or not. So I think
Yeah.
Mhm.
When are we getting an update? In January?
right, but they won't have any more information than largely than we have now.
I'm in favor of moving that down to 10,000.
Mhm.
You're supposed to wait till other people concur, Neil.
The silence is concurring.
No. You got it. Okay, should we move on?
Sure.
Mercifully.
Yeah.
Cemetery is next. And that are just on the sexton, where we're not giving our town employees an increase. I don't think we should give the sexton one.
Well, agreed.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like the year for it.
Okay. And next one is, I have is police. And this is one that I think actually Sabrina had raised about overtime if they have enough.
Yeah. I did flag that. Because it doesn't seem like they have enough.
But they haven't used that much in the past.
Yeah, I know. I just think that based on what Chief Pecora said, and I mean, he's been forced to manage to this, which sounds like it has not been easy. And I just think with the time that we're in, if we could up this even a little bit to help relieve some of that pressure, because what they have in here would be back to what we used to give them, which was 25 grand. Isn't that what we cut it from?
Yeah.
But again, they didn't use it. I mean, this is how the fund balance increases, right? We over budget departments. We have money left over at the end of the year and the fund balance increases.
Mhm.
Am I the only one remembering though? I feel like my memory is that Chief Pecora was saying that this was actually a hardship.
I recall that.
I just think of all that he does and what that department does, it feels sort of, I don't know, wrong to force this upon them.
Well, I think that we all greatly appreciate the chief, and maybe as a signal of that appreciation, we could increase the overtime, but just say $2,000 or something.
And I guess I don't see, I mean, it's not like that money goes nowhere. Like it's properly used for overtime. So if they need it, it's there. And if it's not used, then great. But I feel like I'd rather not have him and others having to waste a lot of time managing to this. I'm trying to find my notes from that conversation. Does anyone know what page that is in the?
Yeah, it's 48. But if we did $2,000 extra, you took his average of overtime, it looks like about 46 extra hours over the year. If my back of the envelope math is right.
It's an hour a week,
Yeah,
not even.
yeah.
An additional hour a week.
Right.
I have written down management nightmare. It's not good for morale, and with overtime, there is no wiggle room because you're stuck with wage and hour laws. And also just noting that Chief does all the emergency management work with a $1 budget. So basically does that as part of his job.
I mean, I'm supportive of going up to 12, just as like a thank you and an appreciation of what he's done. But I just don't know if it's going to be a material improvement for him.
Right. I mean, and I'm not sure I would frame it necessarily as like a thank you, because it's about properly paying our staff so that they're not totally stretched and
But
having to waste time managing.
They haven't spent $3,500 in 10 months. $350 a month. That's 9 hours. I mean, you know, I think he does a great job. You know, the police department in this town is responsive. They're courteous. They're professional. We've budgeted them at 10,000 and they haven't used it. That's the only piece that I'm not getting. I mean, yeah, it could happen. We could have a crisis and need $50,000 of overtime. But historically, we've been at 8,500 or less. And we've had spent, in the year of the COVID nightmare, we spent $3,500 in 10 months on overtime. I just, that's the only piece that I don't follow, just like with the training budget below. You know, we budgeted them at 9,500. They spent 2,100. They've never spent more than 4,200 on this sheet, not never. That's the piece that's inconsistent for me, is that we have a spending history and we ignore it.
Well, I'm not sure I would put it quite in those terms. I do think, you know, it's significant cutting that overtime by 15 grand. I think it would be fair to go up 5 grand, because I think that would make a material difference. And I'm not sure that looking at the actual number reflects the need, because you're forced to manage to this, is my point. And, you know, to think this is a management nightmare for someone like the chief is sort of painful to think about. I mean, they go above and beyond, and
I agree, they go above and beyond. I think they do a phenomenal job.
so
But if it's so difficult, how have we only spent $3,500 in 10 months? That's the piece that's inconsistent for me.
probably because you can't go over, or else, I mean, there's nowhere to go, because you have to pay. I mean, they're managing part-time people, so you have that to deal with, including, you know, the complications with that and hours, and then full-time people. So I just don't think that reflects the need. So I'm arguing for 5 grand.
If we're looking at those two items sort of in conjunction, I'd say, well, we should look at the line above that, part-time also, and there the year-to-date is considerably higher than what the department proposed for this year.
I was going to ask about the relationship between those two things. Is there a push-pull relationship between the part-time wages and the overtime?
I think this year, the relationship is between the full-time wages and the part-time wages, where we've been short of people, full-time officers. Part-time officers have picked that up. So that those two are directly connected.
And I'd also note that because of the state of emergency, folks have been allowed, they've like waived the requirements and you can work beyond the 32 hours as a part-time worker, but that's only because of the state of emergency. So I think they've been managing that.
Is that how they've gotten around not having increased overtime? Is they've increased the part-time hours?
I think that's largely it. And when you're short on full-time, they have been filling in places that you would have to use overtime otherwise.
Okay, so that answers the question to some extent for Jeff, is why they've only gone to 3,500 on the overtime. So they've been using their part-time staff where they normally would use their overtime.
Where are we at big picture right now, Neil, with everything we've kind of trimmed so far?
$4.83.
Okay.
Can we see what happens when we put that up to 15 grand?
Last time we did something like that, it stayed like that.
I'll never do that again. 4.96.
Wait, and it was just at 4.8?
Yeah.
Okay.
Could we just to keep moving, could we just kind of bookmark this, and if we need to come back when we're done, we can?
Does he replace the full-time person that is not available, or people?
We just hired a full-time. We still have one position not filled. So where do you want me to leave this?
I vote for 15 grand. I don't know if we have consensus or a majority.
Well, I'll support it if we take half of it out of the training budget.
I have written down the committee on accountability is going to be bumped to 40 hours per officer per year. Is that part of the training situation?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm proposing we don't cut training and we bump this to 15. So it sounds like Jeff probably does not support that, but I don't want to assume. Anyone else?
I was suggesting 12.
I think I'm more comfortable at 12. But either way, I think I'd like to finish going through the operating budget and maybe come back to this one.
Okay, should I continue?
Sure.
Or
Okay, the next I had was fire department. Part-time wages. There I was proposing reducing 35 to 30, the same as last year's budget. And again, using Jeff's way of thinking, the year to date is only 16.4.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all I had on fire. Somebody else had anything? Okay. My next is more a comment on streets and highways. And there on chimming and paving, I am not proposing changing what's there now, but just because it is such a, a $17,000 increase, want to reemphasize that the board a number of years ago, sort of committed to increasing this line item by 5% a year. We did not do that last year for obvious reasons, and we're doing it again this year. I'd like to continue it, but I thought it's something that should be flagged. If somebody has any comments. If not, my next item is all the way to recreation. Okay, and it's going to be a question for Neil about what is happening with Paula's position. Is it going back to full-time as of January 1, or what's the current thinking?
Actually, you voted for it to go back to full-time today, but she's still on part-time. But the assumption is we'll be back to regular. I'm not sure exactly when, but.
So at this time, do you think that we should just assume she's going to be full-time for 2021, the whole year?
That was the assumption budgeting, yes.
Okay. Okay, hearing nothing else, my final one is in conservation. And I would go back to $1. I think we increased the land use change tax last year, and that's giving them more money than they've had previously. And I would just keep it at the $1 that it has been for years.
Yeah, I remember this conversation about what they can spend money on from their fund. And I think we've had this conversation years past too, is that our feeling is that what they can spend money on is a little broader than theirs.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The statute reflects that it can be spent on anything the conservation can spend money on.
Right.
So with that, Neil, where are we in total?
We're at 4.72%.
Oh, okay. That's within the range of what we were talking about a couple of hours ago. Was there any other items that people wanted to address now, or other places you think we could or should change?
I'm sure we need to increase the select board stipend.
The first year I was on the board, we cut it.
Yeah, it can go up as soon as Ken's done.
Others have places they would trim.
I'm flipping through my notes here.
I keep coming back to Bates, but first of all, we need permission to enter into a long-term lease, which goes before vote at town meeting. And second of all, I'm not sure it makes sense to up that, although I suspect we will be getting more than $400 a month, which is our current arrangement. which we did rather than have $0 a month, I do suspect we will get more than that moving forward. But unless anyone thinks we should change it, I guess we'll just live with it where it is. And
I thought in general on revenues, we decided to
Yeah.
leave them alone and just increase the assessment valuation.
okay.
The only one that I see that sort of goes across several areas is that we're budgeting, well, part of it looks like we're budgeting DPW at $3.10 a gallon for gas and diesel versus the fire department's at $2 for gas and $3.10 for diesel. And I don't know, I didn't check all the other departments, whether that's overstated. And I'm sure it's not a huge amount. It's not that much fuel.
DPW uses very little gas. None of their vehicles use gas, I don't believe. So it's chainsaws and stuff like that.
Okay.
This may be another discussion for another time, but I'm just going back to Bates also, Brini, and noting that in the town facilities maintenance trust, we have 8,000 allocated for Bates building furnace. And so it's probably part of a bigger discussion around setting that rent at an appropriate amount. But I think that is something to consider, that's in our.
One of the people on the chat feature commented that the cost of the phone is almost 50% of the rent that we're getting, which is a valid point. My question, which is not a question for today, but are we allowed to establish a policy that new hires will pay a different percentage for their insurance than existing employees?
Yes.
I suggest we explore that.
I would just say with Bates, the cost of the internet is for the supervisors who are not in the rented section. But I don't know if that makes a difference, but
Is that's classified under phone? I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah, it's phone and internet. And I think also that's, we need it, and those rates are set by the phone company. So there's not a lot that we can do about that.
And the people who rent do have their own phone, which certainly we don't pay for.
Got it.
Okay, if there's nothing else, I'll turn the meeting back over to Sabrina.
Well, okay, I wasn't ready to give up on the overtime situation, but I think it was in there at 12, and I still think it should be 15. But I know Jeff doesn't agree with me.
No, I, as I said, if we could take it out of somewhere else, I'd be happy to support that.
Okay,
You
so
know, again, the spending isn't consistent with our budgeting.
I meant that just in the way that I know that's one vote I don't have with me, but Anna, Stephen, Ken, it sounds like you're not moving on that either, but I just feel pretty strongly on that it, like, moving it up $2,000
20%.
does not feel like a material difference in terms of relieving the management headache that this causes.
Is there someplace else we could pull that extra 23,000 from?
Well, I'm talking about an additional $3,000. Bumping the 12 to 15.
And I guess where I'm at is, looking back at what we spent previously in pre-pandemic years, we didn't need to be over 10.
I just think people are underestimating like the pain that goes into trying to manage to this. That's all. And so I just don't think that it's as simple as saying, well, we never spent it in years past, so it doesn't need to be in the budget. I just, based on what Chief Pecora has said, that does not seem to reflect reality. And having dealt with wage and hour laws professionally, it's a huge pain. So I don't know. I don't think we can look back and say like, oh, that it's that simple. I just don't think it is. And I think we should be listening to what Chief Pecora says on this.
Neil, if we go up to 15, does it still keep us under 5%?
I mean, Neil, do you have any other thoughts on this? Like, am I totally off here? This was my understanding based on what we heard from Chief Pecora.
No, you heard it. You talked directly to him. So
Okay, thanks.
4.8.
Very diplomatic, Neil.
I mean, I'm okay with that.
That's because it's what you wanted.
Still under 5. Still under 5. I can live with 4.8.
Well, should we leave it this way for now? I guess Neil and I really don't have much homework, and we can revisit it and have to finalize it next Monday.
That was a thumbs up from Steven.
Good work.
Yeah, that's not a fun part to do, but yeah.
No.
Thank you, Ken.
Yeah, thank you. And Neil.
Yes, and Neil, definitely. Okay. It's all yours, Sabrina.
So I don't have the agenda in front of me. I think that pretty much all she
We're halfway done.
Am I forgetting something?
Public comment.
I don't think that's on our agenda.
Wow.
But okay, so yes, we already covered other business. I'm happy to, for the 3 attendees, if anyone would like to make public comment, now's your chance. Thank you for joining us tonight, by the way. Going once, going twice. Oh, Steve.
Can you hear me?
Hi, Steve.
How you doing? Sorry, I right at the last minute. I always do that, it seems. Thank you very much, everyone, for tonight and going through the budget as diligently as you do. I remember those days. I actually have something unrelated to the budget. I was just hoping to maybe provide some comments on the proposed, I guess, the Open Space Conservation Commission proposal that was coming forward for the Chesley property. Is this an okay time or?
Yes, we discussed that 2 meetings ago, I guess.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I wasn't able to attend, so I if this is
Sure.
okay.
Sure, if it's yeah.
Well, I'm certainly open as an individual to open space, preserving conservation land. I served as the board representative years ago for the Open Space Committee, so I completely understand the need and want to preserve land. My comment was to be, in my opinion, I would want to be more cautious on the value placed on land that the town would be looking to purchase. I feel that sometimes preservation can be seen as a way to make a profit, and I'm not necessarily suggesting that that's the case here. I would just hesitate to offer up funds, public funds specifically, to preserve land where the typical current use taxes and other factors are not being paid as they would be by a typical property owner when they remove land out of current use. So one piece that I had picked up on during some of your discussions about that particular parcel. And I would just hope that the general public of the Hopkinton community doesn't, I guess, take the brunt of that tax savings that the current owner, essentially had for so many years. I don't know. I know it's a delicate conversation having that, where I'm discussing this, I guess, in public, but I just feel that, people who are able to take advantage of the savings that current use has to offer. There's a reason why there is the tax when you take it back out of current use or sell the property. So I would just hope that the public doesn't have to pay that. So
All right.
that is my comment or suggestion.
Great.
Maybe it's too late for that kind of suggestion. I don't know, but that's fine.
It's a fair point, and I don't know if anyone has anything to respond with, but if not, I'll say thank you for calling in.
Yeah.
All right. Anyone else? We only have 3 people tonight. But we appreciate you all joining us and listening. Okay, so I think that leaves us with adjournment.
So moved.
I think I heard Ken seconding it. Sabrina's yes, Anna,
Yes.
Stephen,
Yes.
Ken,
Yes.
Jeff.
Yes.
All right, thank you everyone for slogging through that, and Ken and Neil especially. Thank you, Robin.
Great job, everyone. Thanks.
Okay,
Good
thank
night.
you.